Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin in the most ordinary places. And this one starts with a mop, a bucket, and a man that nobody saw. Let me take you to Chicago, to a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of the city where Thornbridge Pharmaceuticals towers over the streets below. Marble floors so polished you could see your reflection. Crystal chandeliers hanging from ceilings 3 stories high. The kind of place where every detail whispers one word: money. It's late evening. The executives are still there, of course. They're always there, working late, making deals, building empires. And moving quietly through their world, invisible as a shadow, is David Chen, 42 years old, night janitor. He's been pushing that mop across those marble floors for 4 years now. And in all that time, I bet most of those executives never even learned his name. But David sees everything. On this particular Tuesday evening, David is halfway down the main corridor, mop in hand, when he hears it, shouting. The kind of panicked voices that make your heart skip a beat. He stops, looks up, and that's when he sees the chaos unfolding in the lobby. There's a little girl on the floor, 6 years old maybe, blonde hair falling across her face. She's curled up tight, rocking back and forth, her arms wrapped around her knees like she's trying to hold herself together. Her blue eyes, they're darting around the room like a trapped bird looking for a way out. And you can see it, the fear, the overwhelm, the desperate need for everything to just stop. Around her, 5 executives in $1,000 suits stand frozen. They're whispering to each other. "Episode," one of them mutters. "Behavioral crisis," says another. They look uncomfortable, helpless, like they've stumbled into a situation their Harvard degrees didn't prepare them for. And then there's the security guard, big guy, stern face. He's trying to control the situation the only way he knows how, with commands and warnings. "Get away from her," he barks at anyone who comes close. "That girl might bite. Stay back. I mean it." David stands there, mop still in his hand, and something inside him just clicks. Because you see, David Chen isn't just a janitor. 20 years ago, he was standing in front of a classroom, special education, kids with autism, ADHD, sensory processing disorders, children the world found difficult, but David found beautiful. He taught for 17 years, got his master's degree from Northwestern University, specialized in autism spectrum disorders. He was good at it too, really good. But then the budget cuts came. You know how it goes. Education funding slashed, special programs eliminated. Teachers with decades of experience let go because, well, money talks louder than dedication. David needed to feed his daughter, keep a roof over their heads, so he took what he could get. Night janitor, minimum wage, invisible work. But his experience? That didn't disappear. And when David looks at this little girl on the floor, he doesn't see what everyone else sees. He doesn't see a problem. He doesn't see an episode. He sees his own daughter. Lily, his 16-year-old. She has autism too, and David has spent her entire life learning her language, understanding her world, knowing what sensory overload looks like from the inside. This little girl on the floor, she's drowning. In sounds, in lights, in the energy of all these stressed adults standing around her. And nobody, not one of these highly paid executives, has any idea how to help her. "Can I try to help?" David's voice cuts through the chaos. Calm, steady, the kind of voice that doesn't demand attention but somehow gets it anyway. The security guard wheels around. His arm shoots out, blocking David's path. "You're just the night janitor," he says, and there's contempt in those words. Like David's work clothes determine his worth. "Stay out of this." The last employee who tried to approach her was fired on the spot. David doesn't argue, doesn't defend himself. Instead, his eyes find the little girl's. And for just a second, just one brief, electric second, their eyes meet. Something passes between them. Recognition, understanding. The kind of silent communication that transcends job titles and social barriers. David has seen those eyes before, in his own daughter's face. He knows that look, and he knows what this child needs. Ignoring the security guard's protests, David walks to his cleaning cart. The executives are muttering now. What's he doing? Someone stop him. This is inappropriate. But David isn't listening. He picks up a small bottle of dish soap from his cart, dips his fingers into his bucket of water, and then, without a word, he sits down, right there, on that expensive Italian marble floor that probably costs more per square foot than David makes in a week. He sits down about 10 feet away from the girl, not too close, respecting her space, respecting her boundaries. And then he starts blowing bubbles. 1, 2, 3. Iridescent spheres float into the air, catching the light from the chandelier, drifting slowly across the lobby like tiny miracles. Each one perfect, each one temporary, each one beautiful. The girl's rocking. It slows, just a little at first. Her eyes track one bubble as it floats past, then another. The frantic darting stops. Her breathing changes, deepens. Her shoulders, so tight and hunched, begin to lower. David keeps going. He's not performing, not trying to impress anyone. He's just there, present, creating these small moments of beauty, each bubble carrying away a little bit of her fear, a little bit of her overwhelm. The executives have gone quiet. Even the security guard has stopped shouting. Everyone is watching this impossible thing happen. This little girl, who moments ago was in complete crisis, is now lying on her side, calm, peaceful, watching a single soap bubble hover just above her face as if it's the most fascinating thing in the world. What nobody knows, what nobody can see, is that there's someone else watching too. High above on the mezzanine overlooking the lobby stands Victoria Thornbridge, billionaire, CEO of Thornbridge Pharmaceuticals, a woman who has commanded boardrooms full of world leaders, who has crushed hostile takeovers before her second cup of coffee, who built an empire through intelligence, ruthlessness, and an iron will. And right now, she can barely breathe. Because that little girl on the floor is Sophie, her daughter, her mystery, her greatest challenge. The one thing in Victoria's life that money can't fix. Victoria has tried everything, 43 different specialists in 4 years. Therapists flown in from Europe at $15,000 per week. The best credentials, the fanciest degrees, the most expensive treatments modern medicine has to offer. And none of it worked. Not one of those experts could reach Sophie the way this janitor just did, in minutes, with soap bubbles. Victoria watches as this man, this Asian man in a janitor's uniform, whom she's probably passed in the hallways 100 times without really seeing, sits on the floor with her daughter, patient, calm, understanding her in ways that 43 specialists with fancy degrees never could. Something inside Victoria cracks, just a little, just enough to let the truth in. She takes the elevator down. Her Louboutin heels click across the marble like a judge's gavel. Every executive in that lobby straightens up automatically. Power recognizes power. They know who she is. They know what she can do with a word, a gesture, a glance. But David? David keeps blowing bubbles, completely unaware of the corporate storm about to break over his head. Mr. Chen, Victoria's voice cuts through the air like broken glass, sharp, commanding, the voice of someone used to being obeyed. I need to talk to you now. David stands slowly. His eyes linger on Sophie for just a moment. She's still calm, still peaceful, still lying on the floor watching the last bubble drift away. He knows what's coming. He can feel it in the tension of the room, in the way everyone is looking at him. He's about to be fired. 20 years of his career destroyed by a single moment of compassion, by daring to help when he wasn't asked, by sitting on the floor in his janitor's uniform and doing what no expensive expert could do. But when David finally looks up into Victoria Thornbridge's eyes, he doesn't see what he expected. He doesn't see anger. He sees something far more dangerous: gratitude. And anyone who's ever dealt with truly powerful people knows this truth. Their gratitude always comes with a price you never see coming until it's too late. Victoria's office is on the 42nd floor, the entire floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Chicago that most people only see in movies, the kind of view that costs more than David will earn in his lifetime. David's rubber sneakers make almost no sound on the Persian rug as he enters. That rug probably costs six figures. He can tell by the way it feels under his feet. Hand-woven, ancient, priceless. Sit down, Victoria orders, gesturing to a leather chair that could probably pay David's rent for a year. She doesn't sit. She stands behind her glass desk. It's an intimidation tactic. David recognizes it immediately. He's seen it before in principals' offices, in meetings with wealthy parents. Stand while the other person sits. Look down at them. Establish dominance. But David sits anyway. Calm, unhurried. The silence stretches between them like a wire pulled tight. "Who taught you that?" Victoria finally asks. Her blue eyes are locked on his face like lasers, searching, analyzing. The bubbles, the technique, whatever that was. David takes a slow breath. "My daughter has autism. I learned out of necessity." "Your daughter?" Victoria repeats the words like she's testing them. Like the concept of this janitor having a family, having a life beyond pushing a mop, is somehow strange to her. "And where did you learn about therapeutic techniques? Some extension course, weekend workshop?" There it is, that tone. David has heard it 1,000 times before. The subtle condescension of wealthy people who assume that education and expertise belong only to those who can afford expensive degrees, who think that someone in a janitor's uniform couldn't possibly know anything valuable. "I was a special education teacher for 17 years, David replies, his voice steady and calm. "Specialization in autism spectrum disorders from Northwestern University. Master's degree in educational psychology." The silence that follows is deafening. Victoria blinks. Once. Twice. Like her brain is processing information that doesn't compute. Like the system just crashed and needs to reboot. "Teacher," she says slowly, and you can hear the disbelief in her voice. "And now you work as a night janitor." "People have to eat," David says flatly. No apology in his voice. No shame. Just fact. Education budgets were cut. Special education programs were the first to go. It's not exactly a hot market for teachers specializing in children the system prefers to ignore. Victoria sits down finally. For the first time in years, maybe decades, her executive control wavers. Her carefully constructed armor shows a crack. "You're telling me," she says slowly, "that you have more qualifications than most of the therapists I've hired for Sophie, and you're working as a janitor?" David leans forward slightly. "I'm saying that qualifications on paper mean nothing if you don't know how to connect. How many specialists have you brought in for Sophie? 10, 20, all with impressive degrees and even more impressive price tags." The muscle in Victoria's jaw tightens. 43 different professionals in 4 years. "And how many of them got her to speak?" "None." David nods. Like this confirms everything he already knew. "Because they came to fix her. I came to understand her." Victoria studies the man sitting across from her, really looks at him for maybe the first time, and everything about him challenges every category she's built in her mind. An Asian janitor with a master's degree, a man who cleans bathrooms but speaks like a university professor, someone she assumed was disposable, invisible, worthless, who possesses exactly the skills she's been desperately searching for. "I want to hire you," she says finally. Decision made, problem solved. To work with Sophie as a therapeutic consultant, $15,000 a month, part-time. You keep your current job until we're sure it works. And David laughs. It's a low, rich sound that echoes through that marble and steel office. Not mocking, not bitter, just genuinely amused. "Ms. Thornbridge," he says, and there's something dangerous in his smile now. "You're not offering me a job. You're trying to buy your way out of a moral dilemma." Victoria's face hardens instantly. "Excuse me? You've just discovered that you completely underestimated someone based on his work clothes and the color of his skin. Now you're trying to turn me into another employee, make me part of your system. That way, you don't have to face what you just did. You don't have to acknowledge your own prejudice." "I'm not prejudiced," Victoria snaps, her voice sharp as glass. Then why did you assume I was just an uneducated janitor? Why didn't you ask about my background before judging me unfit to be around your daughter? Victoria opens her mouth to respond, then closes it. Because there's no good answer to that question. No defense that doesn't expose the truth she doesn't want to see. For the first time in decades, someone has broken through her corporate armor. Someone has held up a mirror and forced her to look at something ugly. David stands slowly. Sophie doesn't need another expensive employee, Miss Thornbridge. She needs someone who sees her for who she is, not the project you want her to become. Then what do you suggest? And Victoria's voice is different now, lower, less command, more genuine question. Like she's actually asking for help instead of demanding compliance. Let me spend time with her, David says. No cameras, no stopwatches, no progress reports, just time. And in return, David smiles, not the professional smile he uses with hostile bosses, something genuine, something real. In return, maybe your daughter will learn that the world isn't just a cold place full of people trying to change her. He walks toward the door. His hand is on the handle when he pauses, looks back. Oh, and Ms. Thornbridge, next time someone stops to help your daughter, maybe consider asking about their qualifications before assuming they don't exist. The door closes with a soft click. Victoria is left alone in her 42nd floor office with its million-dollar view and its six-figure furniture. And for the first time in her carefully constructed life, she's facing a truth that bothers her more than any lost deal or stock market crash. She found exactly what she was looking for, in the last place she would have thought to look. And she almost lost it because of her own prejudices, her own assumptions, her own blindness. What she doesn't know, what she can't possibly know yet, is that David Chen has spent 4 years in this building, 4 years watching the rich and powerful through their most vulnerable moments, cleaning their offices when they thought they were alone, listening to their private conversations, witnessing their weaknesses when they assumed no one was paying attention. And now, for the first time, one of them has given him exactly the opening he's been waiting for. 3 days pass, 3 days of silence. And then, during David's night shift, his phone rings. Victoria's name on the screen. Her voice sounds different, less CEO, more human. Sophie hasn't eaten since our conversation, she says without preamble. No greeting, no small talk, just desperate honesty. She hasn't drawn, she hasn't spoken, she's regressing. David pauses in his cleaning. And what do you want from me? Accept my offer, please. That last word probably cost her more than the $15,000 she offered. I haven't changed my mind about the terms, David says calmly. No supervision, no stopwatches, no reports. Agreed. The next morning, David arrives at Victoria's penthouse in Chicago's Gold Coast. The building is the kind where the doorman calls up before letting anyone in, where the elevator requires a special key just to reach the top floors. But David isn't alone. When Victoria opens the door, there's a teenage girl standing beside him. 16 years old, confident posture, warm smile, carrying a backpack that looks well-worn and well-loved. This is my daughter, Lily, David says before Victoria can ask. I thought Sophie might benefit from interacting with someone closer to her age. Victoria looks at the girl. Really looks. She sees poise, intelligence, the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. And it's disconcerting somehow to see all of this in a teenager from a world so different from her own. She's 16, Victoria says, like this is a problem, and Sophie is 8. Sometimes the age gap creates a safe space that peers can't offer, David explains. Lily smiles politely. Hello, Mrs. Thornbridge. My father told me about Sophie. I brought some materials that might interest her. There's no fear in her voice, no intimidation. She walks into that multi-million-dollar penthouse like she belongs there, not with arrogance. Just with the simple confidence of someone who knows her own worth isn't determined by someone else's bank account. Sophie is in her room, same position as always, curled in the corner, arms around her knees, eyes distant. But when she sees Lily, something changes. Something shifts in her expression. Lily sits down on the floor. Natural, easy. She pulls out watercolors and textured paper from her backpack. Hi, Sophie, she says, her voice soft and warm. I'm Lily. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, but I thought we could paint together. What happens over the next 2 hours leaves Victoria completely disarmed. Sophie approaches Lily, slowly at first, then with more confidence. She picks up a brush, dips it in blue, then yellow, starts mixing colors, creating shades she's never tried before. And Lily tells stories about colors, about how blue is the sky wanting to hug the earth, how yellow is the sun laughing, how every color has its own personality, its own voice. Orange, Sophie whispers, her first word in days. That's right, Lily smiles. Orange is when red and yellow decide to dance together. David watches from the doorway. He's taking mental notes, not just about Sophie, but about Victoria too. The way she's holding her phone, discreetly filming, a corporate habit, documenting everything. But there's something else in her expression, something softer, vulnerable. For the first time, she's seeing her daughter, not as a problem to solve, not as a project to manage, but as a person, a unique, beautiful person who just needs to be understood. The peace lasts for 2 perfect hours. And then the doorbell rings. Victoria's face changes. Oh no, I completely forgot. Ms. Thornbridge, the intercom crackles. Dr. Hawthorne is here for his scheduled session with Sophie. Richard Hawthorne is exactly the kind of expert Victoria used to hire. 52 years old, Harvard degree, suits that cost more than most cars, fees that would make your eyes water, and an arrogance that fills a room before he even walks into it. He's built a very lucrative career treating the children of the elite, $15,000 per session. And from what David has observed over 4 years of cleaning his office at night, most of those sessions involve techniques Hawthorne could have learned from any basic manual. He enters the penthouse like he owns it. Victoria, dear, he says, barely glancing at David and Lily. Let's see how our little Sophie is progressing today. He stops when he sees the scene on the floor. Sophie painting calmly. Lily beside her, mixing colors. David sitting nearby with his worn notebook. What is this? Hawthorne demands, and you can hear the professional disdain dripping from every word. Who are these people? Dr. Hawthorne, Victoria says carefully, this is David Chen and his daughter Lily. They're helping Sophie. Hawthorne laughs. It sounds more like a bark, harsh, dismissive. Helping? Victoria, you can't just let anyone interact with a child who needs specialized care. This is irresponsible, potentially harmful. David rises slowly. When he stands to his full height, he's taller than Hawthorne. But that's not what makes him imposing. It's the calm in his eyes, the steadiness of his voice. Dr. Hawthorne, isn't it? I've read some of your articles. Interesting how your revolutionary techniques are almost identical to the standard practices we teachers were using 10 years ago. Teachers, Hawthorne repeats, and he laughs again. That same dismissive bark. Ah, so you're one of those. Let me guess, special education, some community college? You believe that love and patience solve everything? Northwestern, master's degree in educational psychology, 17 years of practical experience. David pauses, lets that sink in. And you're right about one thing. I do believe that love and patience work better than arrogance and inflated prices. The silence that follows is tense, dangerous. Sophie has stopped painting. She's looking between the adults, her shoulders beginning to tense again. She can feel the conflict, the anger, the energy shifting in the room. Victoria, Hawthorne says, his voice now cold as ice, if you want to continue with my services, I must insist that you keep amateurs away from Sophie's treatment. This is completely unprofessional. Victoria looks at Sophie. Her daughter has instinctively moved closer to Lily, seeking safety, seeking comfort. From a 16-year-old girl she just met, rather than from a 52-year-old doctor with a Harvard degree. Then Victoria looks at David. Standing there calm and unshakable in the face of obvious hostility, not defending himself, not arguing, just present. Finally, she looks at Hawthorne, at his posture that radiates the kind of authority she's respected for years, the kind she's never questioned. Until now. Dr. Hawthorne, she says finally, perhaps we can schedule another day. Hawthorne's face goes rigid. If that's how you want to conduct your daughter's treatment, I can't be held responsible for the results. When this experiment fails, and it will fail, my phone number will remain the same. He picks up his leather briefcase, walks to the door, and leaves without another word. The apartment falls quiet. Sophie returns to her painting, but her brushstrokes are faster now, more agitated. The peace has been broken. Does he always talk like that? Lily asks softly. Victoria nods slowly. Most experts do. They're so certain about everything. David is writing something in his notebook. He doesn't look up when he speaks. Certainty, he says quietly, is a luxury only those who have never doubted themselves can afford. That night, after David and Lily have left, Victoria lies awake in her bed. The city lights filter through her floor-to-ceiling windows. Chicago spreads out below her like a sea of diamonds. She's reviewing everything she witnessed. For the first time in years, the first time since Sophie was diagnosed, her daughter spent 3 hours without a single crisis. 3 hours trying the new Palmers, connecting with another person, smiling, speaking. And the man who made this possible was instantly discredited by an expert who charges more for one session than David earns in 2 months of mopping floors. What Victoria doesn't know, what she can't possibly know, is that David spent those 3 hours not just observing Sophie. He was observing her too. Every reaction, every hesitation, every moment of doubt, all of it carefully noted in that worn notebook. Because David Chen has learned something important during his 4 years cleaning executive offices. The most powerful people in the world are rarely confronted with their own contradictions. They're surrounded by people who agree with them, who confirm their worldview, who never challenge their assumptions. And when someone finally does confront them, when someone holds up that mirror and forces them to look, the revelation can be devastating. As David walks through the dark Chicago streets toward the subway, he pulls out his phone, scrolls through his contacts, finds a name he hasn't used in months. He types out a message. I need a favor. Tomorrow night, it's about that project we discussed. The reply comes within seconds. I thought you gave up on that idea. David stops walking, looks up at the towers of glass and steel rising above him. At the lit windows where people like Victoria Thornbridge make decisions that affect thousands of lives. Where experts like Dr. Hawthorne collect obscene fees while providing minimal care. He types his response. I gave up a lot of things when my wife died, but some battles are worth fighting, especially when you finally find the right battlefield. He hits send, and somewhere in that city of 8 million people, wheels begin to turn, plans begin to unfold, justice begins to wake up, because the invisible man is about to become very, very visible. And when he finally speaks, the whole world is going to listen. You know what they say about storms, right? The quiet before one hits is always the most dangerous, because that's when everything looks normal, peaceful, safe. And you have no idea that the whole world is about to change. For Dr. Richard Hawthorne and his colleagues, Thursday morning started like any other day. Expensive coffee, designer suits, the comfortable arrogance of men who believed their credentials made them untouchable. By the end of that day, their entire world would be in ruins. The emergency meeting of the Thornbridge Pharmaceuticals Medical Board was called for 2 o'clock. Dr. Hawthorne had insisted on it, demanded it, actually. He discovered that Victoria had formally hired David Chen as Sophie's therapeutic consultant, and he was furious. The conference room on the 40th floor smelled like money and bruised egos. Rich mahogany table, leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago. The kind of room where powerful people made powerful decisions. Dr. Hawthorne sat at one end of the table, his Harvard diploma practically radiating from his expensive suit. Next to him sat Dr. Patricia Reynolds, a child neuropsychiatrist with her own impressive credentials and equally impressive fees. Around the table sat various board members and executives. Victoria sat at the head, her laptop open, but her attention kept drifting to her phone, to the photos Lily had just sent her. Sophie painting, Sophie smiling, Sophie holding up a picture she'd made, her face glowing with pride. This is absurd. Hawthorne slammed his papers down on the glass surface, making everyone jump. A company of Thornbridge's stature cannot allow unqualified charlatans to compromise serious medical treatment. This Chen person is dangerous. He's giving Victoria false hope. He's interfering with established therapeutic protocols. De Reynolds nodded vigorously. Her diamond earrings caught the light. I couldn't agree more. Soap bubble therapy? That's dangerous pseudoscience. It's embarrassing. If word gets out that Thornbridge Pharmaceuticals is endorsing this kind of quackery, the damage to our reputation will be catastrophic. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but the conference room door opened before she could speak. David Chen entered, but he wasn't wearing his janitor's uniform. He wore a simple gray suit, nothing expensive, nothing flashy, but he wore it with the quiet confidence of a man who knew exactly who he was and what he was worth. In his hand, he carried a leather briefcase, worn but well-maintained. Behind him walked an elegant woman with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her suit was professional, expensive. She carried herself with the authority of someone used to being in rooms like this. Ms. Thornbridge, David said calmly, completely ignoring the hostile stares burning holes in his back. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this discussion. You weren't invited, Utter Reynolds hissed, her face flushing red. This is a closed medical board meeting. You have no right to be here. The gray-haired woman smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark that's just spotted blood in the water. Actually, she said, her voice crisp and clear, I asked for him to be here. Dr. Elizabeth Wong, editor-in-chief of the Journal of Child Psychology. I'm here to discuss some troubling irregularities that have come to our attention. Dr. Hawthorne's face went pale, actually pale, like someone had just drained all the blood from his head. David set his briefcase on the conference table. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. He opened it slowly, deliberately, and removed a thick stack of documents. During my 4 years working in this building at night, David began, his voice steady and calm, I had involuntary access to many conversations and documents. Initially, I ignored it. I'm just the janitor, after all. Not my business, right? But when I noticed the pattern, I began to document it. He slid a set of photographs across the table. They fanned out like cards in a poker game, each one showing pages from medical reports, dates, treatment plans, progress notes. Dr. Hawthorne, David said, looking directly at the man who had called him an amateur just days ago. These are copies of your reports on Sophie from the last 18 months. Take a look. Notice anything familiar? Hawthorne's hand shook slightly as he reached for the documents. His eyes scanned them. Once. Twice. His jaw clenched. They're all identical, David continued, his voice still calm, still steady. Just with different dates. You changed the date at the top, ran spell check, and printed them out. Copy and paste. $15,000 per session for work you did once and recycled 18 times. That's not exactly what I'd call personalized care, doctor. That's invasion of privacy, Hawthorne stammered, his composure cracking like ice on a warming lake. You can't use documents obtained illegally. It's documentation of medical fraud, Dr. Wong interrupted, her voice cold as winter. Charging $15,000 per session using prefabricated reports is a federal crime, Dr. Hawthorne. Mail fraud, wire fraud, healthcare fraud. Take your pick. The room erupted, board members leaning forward, executives whispering urgently. Someone reached for their phone, but David wasn't finished. He pulled out another file, thicker than the first. And this time when he spoke, there was something different in his voice. Not anger, something quieter, something more powerful. Justice. Dr. Reynolds, David said, sliding documents in her direction. These are transcripts of phone conversations you had with Dr. Hawthorne and 3 other specialists, discussing how to extend treatment for wealthy children to maximize profits, how to recommend unnecessary additional sessions, how to create dependency so families would keep paying. They were inadvertently recorded by the office cleaning system. The cameras in the corners, the microphones built into the conference room equipment, meant to record board meetings. but also recording private conversations when doctors thought they were alone. David had spent 4 years emptying trash cans, 4 years cleaning whiteboards, 4 years being invisible while the powerful talked freely, never imagining that anyone was listening. Dr. Reynolds stood up abruptly. Her chair fell backward with a crash that made everyone flinch. "I'm going to sue you," she spat, her professional mask completely shattered. "I'm going to sue all of you. This is entrapment. This is—" "With what money?" David asked simply. "Because the federal investigation into your billing schemes began this morning, based on evidence I've been collecting for 4 years. Evidence I delivered to the FBI and the state medical board 6 hours ago." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop in that conference room. Everyone staring at David, this janitor, this invisible man who had just walked into their world and detonated a bomb they never saw coming. Victoria was frozen in her chair, staring at David like she was seeing him for the first time. Really seeing him. "You know what else I found?" David opened a third file. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. Sophie wasn't the only child. There are 17 different families documented here. 17 children receiving purposely prolonged, ineffective treatments. Children whose parents were desperate, vulnerable, willing to pay anything for help. And you, he looked around the table, you turned their desperation into a business model. He laid out more documents, case files, billing records, email exchanges discussing which families had the deepest pockets, which children could be kept in treatment the longest. It was damning, all of it. 4 years of evidence, 4 years of watching, listening, documenting, 4 years of being underestimated. Dr. Hawthorne tried one last desperate card. He stood up, straightened his tie, and fixed David with what he probably thought was an intimidating stare. "You're just a janitor with a hero complex," he said, his voice shaking slightly despite his attempt at authority. "No court will take your accusations seriously. I have connections, influence, reputation. You're nobody. You clean toilets for a living." David smiled. It wasn't a mean smile. It wasn't even an angry smile. It was the smile of a man who had waited years for this exact moment, who had been patient, strategic, who had known that eventually the truth would matter more than titles or money or power. "Dr. Hawthorne," David said softly, "you are absolutely right about one thing. I really am just a janitor, but I'm also the janitor who spent 1,400 nights cleaning your offices, listening to your private conversations, photographing documents that you left open on your desks because you never imagined someone like me would matter." He paused. Let that sink in. "You never saw me. None of you did. I was furniture, background noise, invisible. And that invisibility, that was my superpower." Dr. Wong stepped forward. Her presence commanded the room in a way that didn't need to be loud or aggressive. "Anisha, just absolute. Dr. Hawthorne, Dr. Reynolds, the state medical board will be officially notified today. Your licenses are being reviewed, and the families you exploited have already been contacted by lawyers specializing in medical malpractice. I expect you will be hearing from them very soon." Hawthorne's face had gone from pale to gray. Reynolds was trembling, her hands gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "This isn't over," Hawthorne said, but his voice had lost all its power, all its certainty. He sounded like what he really was, a man whose carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. "You're right," David agreed. "It's not over. It's just beginning. Because every family you exploited deserves justice. Every child you failed deserves better. And now they're going to get it." Dr. Hawthorne grabbed his briefcase. Dr. Reynolds grabbed hers. They left the conference room like fugitives fleeing a crime scene, which in a way they were. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a period at the end of a very long, very ugly sentence. The remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Some were pale, some looked sick. A few were already on their phones, presumably calling lawyers. Victoria remained at the head of the table. Her hands were shaking slightly. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why did you help me?" David closed his briefcase. He looked at this powerful woman, this billionaire CEO who could buy and sell companies with a phone call, and he saw something he'd seen in his own mirror after his wife died. Someone who was lost. Someone who needed help but didn't know how to ask for it. Because Sophie deserves someone who would fight for her, David said simply. And because sometimes justice needs witnesses. People who no one notices are paying attention. At that exact moment, Victoria's phone buzzed. A text message from Lily. She picked it up, read it, and her eyes filled with tears. The message said, Sophie said her first complete sentence today. Is Daddy David coming back tomorrow? Victoria looked up at David, tears now streaming down her face. In that expensive conference room, in front of her board members and executives, she didn't care anymore about her corporate image, about appearing strong and in control. She called you Daddy, Victoria whispered. David's expression softened. For the first time since entering the room, the warrior became a father again. Kids, he said gently, always know who really cares about them, regardless of diplomas on the wall, regardless of hourly rates. They know. Dr. Wong gathered her materials. I'll be in touch about the investigation, Miss Thornbridge, but for what it's worth. She glanced at David. Your daughter is very lucky. After everyone left, Victoria and David stood alone in that conference room. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting everything gold. What happens now? Victoria asked. Now, David said, we focus on Sophie. Everything else? He gestured to the scattered documents on the table. That's just cleaning up the mess other people made, which, ironically, I'm pretty good at. Victoria laughed. It was a broken sound, part relief, part exhaustion, part wonder at how completely her world had shifted in less than a week. I want to create something, she said suddenly. A foundation, a program. Something that helps other families, other children. Would you help me? David looked at this woman who, just days ago, had offered him money to solve her conscience, who had tried to buy her way out of confronting her own prejudices. But people can change, people can grow when they're brave enough to face uncomfortable truths. Yes, David said, I'll help you. 6 months passed, 6 months that changed everything. It's a crisp October morning in Chicago, and McCormick Place Convention Center is packed. More than 3,000 mental health professionals from across the country have gathered for the National Autism Congress. Researchers, therapists, educators, parents, advocates. The main auditorium is massive, stadium seating rising up like a mountain, a stage with screens 50 feet wide on either side. The kind of setup usually reserved for rock concerts or major political events. And on that stage, standing at the podium with a spotlight on him, is David Chen. He's wearing a suit. A nice one this time, Victoria insisted. But he still looks slightly uncomfortable in it, like he's more at home in simpler clothes, more honest clothes. The applause started the moment he walked on stage, and it hasn't stopped. 3,000 people on their feet, clapping, cheering, some crying. David waits, patient, until the noise finally dies down. Thank you, he says, his voice amplified throughout the enormous space. But I'm not alone up here today. He gestures to the side of the stage, and out walks Sophie, 8 years old now, wearing a blue dress she picked out herself. Her blonde hair is held back with clips covered in tiny painted butterflies. Butterflies she painted with Lily last week. In her hand, she carries a pink microphone. She specifically requested pink. The audience erupts again. Sophie walks to David's side. She's nervous. You can see it in the way she holds the microphone, in the slight tremble of her hands. But David puts a gentle hand on her shoulder, and she looks up at him, smiles. And suddenly, she's not nervous anymore. My name is Sophie, she says, and her voice, clear and strong, echoes throughout the auditorium. And this is Daddy David. He taught me that being different doesn't mean you're broken. The applause is deafening now. People aren't just clapping. They're cheering, sobbing. In the front row, Victoria Thornbridge sits with tears streaming down her face. She doesn't try to hide them, doesn't care who sees. Next to her sits Lily, now 17, holding her phone up to record this moment, to capture it forever. People ask me what happened to Dr. Hawthorne and Dr. Reynolds. David continues when the room quiets. They ask if I feel vindicated, if I feel satisfied with their downfall. He pauses, looks out at the sea of faces. Federal investigations resulted in fines of $2 million each. They lost their medical licenses. There's a list of malpractice lawsuits that will keep them busy for the next decade. Dr. Hawthorne now sells insurance over the phone. George Reynolds had moved to Montana and drives for a rideshare company. Someone in the audience actually cheers. David holds up a hand. But that's not why I'm here. I'm not here to celebrate anyone's destruction. I'm here because of what we built from the ashes of that corrupt system. The screens on either side of the stage light up. Images appear, children painting, laughing, playing, learning, thriving. The Chen Thornbridge Program for Neurodiverse Inclusion, David says, and his voice fills with emotion now. It isn't just about therapy. It's about recognizing that every child brings unique gifts to the world, gifts we need to learn to value, to celebrate, to nurture. More images. Training sessions with teachers, workshops with parents, therapy rooms that look more like art studios than clinical spaces. We've trained more than 500 educators in unconventional techniques, David continues. The therapeutic bubbles method, yes, soap bubbles, has been documented in 17 academic studies showing superior results to traditional treatments in 86% of cases. He smiles. Turns out that 43 specialists with fancy degrees were wrong, and a janitor with dish soap was right. Who would have thought? Laughter ripples through the audience. Warm, genuine. Sophie tugs on David's sleeve. He bends down so she can whisper in his ear. Then he straightens up, smiling. Sophie wants to say something. He holds the microphone down to her level. Daddy David says we're all works of art, Sophie says, her young voice filled with wisdom beyond her years. Some of us just need different paints. The audience loses it completely. People are openly crying now, standing again, applauding. David lifts Sophie up so she can see everyone. This little girl who, 6 months ago, couldn't speak, couldn't connect, was labeled as broken by expert after expert. And now she's teaching thousands of professionals about acceptance, about diversity, about seeing beauty where others saw only problems. From the front row, Lily captures it all on video. Later, it will be posted online. It will go viral. Hashtags will trend. Hashtag Daddy David. Hashtag Sophie Speaks. Hash the invisible hero. But right now, in this moment, none of that matters. What matters is Avinyam held safe in David's arms, beaming at 3,000 people who see her exactly as she is and love her for it. After the presentation, there's a gala dinner, the kind of event where people pay $500 a plate and all the proceeds go to the foundation. Victoria arranged everything. She's good at that, taking her business skills and applying them to something that actually matters. David sits at the head table, still uncomfortable in his fancy suit. He keeps tugging at his collar. Lily, sitting next to him, keeps laughing and telling him to stop. Victoria approaches the podium to give her speech. She's transformed over these 6 months. Still powerful, still commanding, but there's something softer now, more human. 6 months ago, she begins, I was a woman who had everything except what mattered most. My daughter's happiness, her peace, her voice. I had spent millions of dollars on experts, on treatments, on specialists with impressive credentials, and none of it worked. She looks directly at David, and then a janitor sat on the floor and blew bubbles. And my daughter smiled for the first time in months. She pauses, lets that image sink in. I learned something important that day. That expertise doesn't always come with expensive degrees. That wisdom doesn't always wear suits. That sometimes the people we overlook, the people we don't even see, are the ones with the answers we need most. The room is silent, everyone listening. David Chen exposed corruption in our medical system. He brought down fraudulent doctors. He documented evidence for 4 years, while everyone around him assumed he was just the invisible man pushing a mop. But more than that, he taught me to see my daughter, really see her, not as a problem to fix, but as a person to understand. Victoria's voice breaks slightly. He gave me back my daughter, and he gave Sophie something even more precious. He gave her the world. The applause is thunderous. Later, David receives the National Award for Innovation in Special Education. It's a crystal sculpture that probably weighs 10 pounds and is completely impractical. He accepts it with a speech that lasts exactly 90 seconds. I dedicate this award, he says, to all the children who were called broken when they were really just misunderstood, and to the parents who had the courage to question experts who charge fortunes to apply prejudices disguised as science. Short, simple, true. That night, driving home in Victoria's car, she insisted on providing a driver. Sophie falls asleep in the back seat. Her fingers are still stained with blue and yellow paint from the artwork shop she led earlier. Yes, she led, an 8-year-old teaching adults about creative expression. Lily sits next to her, editing video on her laptop. She's become a national advocate for neurodiverse children's rights. 3 months ago, she gave a speech to Congress. An actual speech to actual members of Congress. And they listened. Her words helped pass a federal law guaranteeing access to alternative therapies in the public health system. A law that will help millions of families who can't afford $15,000 specialists. Lily Chen, 17 years old, changing the world. Victoria rides in the front passenger seat. She's stepping down as president of Thornbridge Pharmaceuticals next week. Officially, she's going to run the foundation full-time. Her personal fortune, once focused on corporate acquisitions and hostile takeovers, now funds inclusion centers in 16 states. The Wall Street Journal did a cover story on her. From the boardroom to the floor, how a CEO learned to lead on her knees. Do you know what changed everything? Victoria asked David as they watched the city lights slide past the window. What? David says softly. You refused to accept the place they assigned you. If you had remained just the invisible janitor, Sophie would still be silent. I'd still be paying charlatans, and 237 other families would still be looking for answers in the wrong places. David is quiet for a moment, thinking. Sometimes, he finally says, the best revenge isn't destroying those who underestimate you. It's proving them so wrong that the whole world notices. Victoria smiles. You did more than prove them wrong. You changed everything. Today, the Chen method is taught at 43 universities nationwide. Professors who once would have dismissed soap bubbles as pseudoscience now assign it as required reading. Doctoral students write dissertations about unconventional therapeutic techniques. The academic world has been forced to confront its own arrogance. Sophie, now 12 years old in present day, paints pictures that are sold in prestigious Chicago galleries. Not charity sales, not sympathy purchases, real art, valuable art, art that critics call hauntingly beautiful and profoundly moving. All proceeds go to inclusion programs. She's become an artist, a real one, because someone saw her gifts instead of her limitations. Lily is in college now, studying psychology and advocacy, planning to continue the work her father started. She gives speeches, writes articles, appears on podcasts and television shows, and she always credits Sophie as her inspiration. My sister, she calls her, because that's what Sophie is now. Not by blood, but by something stronger, by choice, by love. And David Chen never had to clean another bathroom in his life. The foundation pays him a generous salary. He could afford a nice apartment now, new clothes, a car, but he still lives simply, still wears modest clothes, still takes the subway sometimes, even though he doesn't have to. And in his office, a real office with windows and bookshelves and a desk that doesn't wobble, he keeps his old janitor's uniform framed on the wall. The nameplate underneath reads, "Reminder of when people thought they knew who I was." Students come to visit sometimes, researchers, journalists. They all want to know the same thing. How did you do it? How did you stay patient for 4 years? How did you document everything without getting caught? How did you know it would work? And David always gives the same answer. I didn't know it would work. I just knew it was right. And sometimes that's enough. He pauses, looks at that framed uniform. People ask me if I'm angry about the years I lost cleaning toilets when I could have been teaching. The truth is, those years taught me something no university could: how to observe, how to listen, How to recognize value where others see only invisibility. He turns back to his visitors. The janitor sees everything. The CEO, the doctor, the lawyer. They all let their guard down around the janitor. They speak freely. They leave documents out. They reveal their true selves because they don't think anyone important is watching. A small smile. But I was watching. I was always watching. And I was taking notes. The greatest irony of the whole story, and David reflects on this often, is that the men who tried to silence him ended up amplifying his voice to the entire world. Dr. Hawthorne was right about one thing. David really was just a janitor, but he forgot something crucial. Janitors spend years observing, learning, documenting, seeing things others don't even know are there. And when they finally decide to speak, they have a lot to say. Last week, David received an email from a janitor in Seattle, a woman who cleans offices at a tech company. She'd read about him and about what he did. She wrote, "I have a master's degree in computer science. Lost my job in layoffs. Been cleaning offices for 3 years now. I watch these tech bros make terrible decisions, write bad code, ignore security vulnerabilities. Everyone treats me like I'm invisible, like I don't matter. Your story gave me hope. If you could do it, maybe I can too." David wrote back immediately, "You already matter. You always mattered. Don't wait for permission to speak up. Don't wait for someone to see you. Make them see you. Document everything. Be patient. Be strategic. And when the moment comes, be brave." Because that's the real lesson of this story. Not that David was special, not that he was exceptional, but that he was seen as neither. And he used that invisibility as power. The world is full of invisible people. Janitors, waitresses, security guards, home health aides, people who clean our offices and serve our food and watch our children and keep our world running. And we don't see them. We look right through them. We make assumptions about who they are based on their uniforms, their job titles, their paychecks, but they see us. They see everything, and some of them, the brave ones, the patient ones, the ones who refuse to accept the place society assigns them. Some of them are taking notes, watching, waiting, learning, until the moment comes when they can finally speak. And when they do, the whole world changes. Sophie is painting right now, in the art studio that Victoria built for her in the Foundation's headquarters. She's working on a series called Invisible Colors, paintings about the things people don't see but that exist anyway. There's one called The Janitor's Eyes. It shows a figure in a uniform. You can't see his face, but his eyes are filled with galaxies, with wisdom, with silent observation, with patient power. It's her tribute to David, to the man who saw her when everyone else saw only problems, to the man who sat on the floor and blew bubbles and changed her entire life, to the man who was invisible until he decided not to be. Lily walks into the studio, camera in hand. She's making a documentary, telling the whole story, from the marble lobby to the convention center, from soap bubbles to congressional testimony. "What should we call it?" she asked David, who's visiting today. David looks at Sophie's painting, at the janitor with galaxy eyes, at the visual representation of everything he learned in 4 years of being overlooked. "Call it the revolution you didn't see coming," he says softly, because that's what it was. A revolution started by people the world trained itself not to notice, by voices the powerful learned to tune out, by individuals the system assumed didn't matter. He pauses. "But we do matter. We always mattered. We just needed someone brave enough to prove it." Sophie adds one final brushstroke to her painting, a single soap bubble floating in the corner. Small, translucent, easy to miss if you're not really looking. But it's there, just like David was there, just like all the invisible people are there, watching, listening, learning, waiting for their moment to rise. And when that moment comes, when they finally decide to speak, to act, to demand to be seen, the world will have no choice but to listen. Because the greatest revolution isn't fought with weapons or money or power. It's fought with patience, with documentation, with the quiet courage of people who refuse to accept the place others choose for them People who build the world their children deserve to live in, one soap bubble at a time. This is the story of David Chen, the janitor who became a hero, the invisible man who changed the world, the reminder that value exists in the most unexpected places. If only we have the wisdom to look. May we all learn to see the people we've trained ourselves to overlook. May we all have the courage to speak when the world expects us to stay silent. And may we all remember, the most powerful revolutions are the ones nobody sees coming.